What if the reason someone is pulling away from you is not because you stopped being interesting, but because you started trying too hard to keep them? Think about it. You send another message because they haven't replied. You explain yourself again because you feel misunderstood. You become more available because you're afraid they're losing interest. You ask for reassurance because silence feels unbearable. And for a moment, you believe you're fighting for the relationship. But psychologically, something else may be happening. You may be turning connection into pressure. And the more pressure the other person feels, the more they may begin to distance themselves. This is one of the most painful paradoxes in human relationships. The more desperately you try to hold on to someone, the harder it can become for them to stay close. But here's where this gets deeper. The problem isn't simply that you're too needy, and the solution isn't to suddenly become cold, play hard to get, or deliberately ignore someone so they will chase you. Those are just different forms of control. The real question is, why does another person's distance create such an intense need to pursue them? Why can one unanswered message occupy your mind for hours? Why can someone's change in behavior make you think about them even more? And why, sometimes, does rejection feel like it's threatening much more than the relationship itself? Because underneath the chasing may be something you haven't recognized yet. Fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of rejection. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if this person walks away, something valuable about you walks away with them. And this is where biblical psychology becomes incredibly revealing. The Bible doesn't merely tell us what people do. It repeatedly exposes why the human heart does it. Scripture speaks about fear, approval, attachment, identity, control, love, patience, and trust. Psychological realities that modern research continues to explore. So this isn't a video about learning how to manipulate someone into coming back. It's about understanding what happens inside your mind when you are afraid of losing someone, and how that fear can accidentally create the very distance you're trying to prevent. Because sometimes, the person you're chasing isn't actually the thing you need most. Sometimes, what you're really chasing is reassurance that you're worthy of being loved. And until you understand that distinction, you may keep pursuing people while slowly losing yourself. So let's uncover psychology behind the chase, and what Scripture reveals about becoming secure enough to love without fear. Chasing rarely begins with desperation. It usually begins with something that feels completely normal. You like someone. You enjoy their attention. You feel connected to them. Then something changes. Their replies become slower. Their messages become shorter. They stop initiating conversations as often. Maybe they seem distracted, distant, or uncertain. And suddenly, something inside you changes too. You start thinking about them more. You check your phone more often. You replay previous conversations. You wonder whether you said something wrong. And eventually you reach out. At first, it feels reasonable. You send a message, then another. You try to explain yourself. You become more available. You give more attention. You try harder to make the connection work. But there's a hidden psychological shift taking place. You are no longer simply trying to connect with the person. You are beginning to regulate your emotions through the person. That distinction is extremely important. Healthy connection sounds like, I enjoy this person and I want to build something meaningful with them. Anxious pursuit sounds like, I need this person's response so I can feel okay again. And once the second pattern begins, your behavior can become increasingly intense. You don't necessarily text because you have something meaningful to say. You text because their silence is making you anxious. You don't necessarily ask, how are you? You are secretly asking, do you still want me? You don't necessarily seek conversation. You seek reassurance. And every time they respond, the anxiety temporarily disappears. That relief is powerful. Your brain learns, when I feel uncertain, pursue them. So the next time they become distant, you pursue again. This creates a psychological loop. Uncertainty creates anxiety. Anxiety creates pursuit. Pursuit creates temporary relief. Temporary relief reinforces the pursuit, and now you can become trapped in a cycle without realizing it. This is why some people find themselves thinking about another person constantly. They assume, I must care about them deeply because I can't stop thinking about them. But constant thinking does not always mean deep connection. Sometimes it means your brain is trying to resolve uncertainty. You are searching for an answer. Do they still care? Are they losing interest? Will they come back? What changed? And because you don't have a definite answer, your mind keeps returning to the problem. This is where chasing becomes dangerous, because the more emotionally activated you become, the more important their behavior appears. A delayed response feels significant. A short message feels threatening. A change in tone feels like rejection. And suddenly, another person's attention becomes connected to your sense of emotional security. But Scripture gives us an important warning about fear. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. 1 John 4 verse 18. This doesn't mean genuine love never experiences vulnerability. It means fear should not become a foundation controlling how we love. When fear takes over, love can become distorted. You may pursue when you should pause. You may explain when you should listen. You may hold on when you should release. You may try to control an outcome that was never yours to control. And this is the first hidden truth about chasing. The intensity of your pursuit may not always reveal the depth of your love. Sometimes, it reveals the depth of your fear. Once you understand that, you can begin asking a much more important question. Am I pursuing this person because I genuinely want connection, or because I'm afraid of what their distance means about me? That question changes everything. Because before you can build a secure relationship with another person, you have to understand the insecurity operating inside yourself. Here is something strange about human psychology. Sometimes, the less certain you are about someone's feelings, the more you think about them. If someone consistently shows interest, responds to you, communicates clearly, and makes their intentions obvious, your mind eventually relaxes. You don't have to constantly analyze a relationship, but introduce uncertainty and everything changes. They respond quickly one day and disappear the next. They seem deeply interested, then suddenly distant. They give you attention, then pull it back. And now your mind becomes occupied with one question. What happened? This is where uncertainty becomes psychologically powerful. Your brain doesn't like unresolved situations. When you don't know where you stand, your mind starts searching for information. You replay conversations. You examine their tone. You check when they were last online. You notice whether they viewed your story. You wonder whether their short reply means something. You search for clues because your brain wants closure. And the more uncertain the situation becomes, the more mentally significant that person can appear. This creates a dangerous illusion. You may think, I can't stop thinking about them because they must be special. But sometimes you can't stop thinking about them because the situation is unresolved. Your brain is not necessarily experiencing deeper love. It may be experiencing greater psychological activation. This is one reason inconsistent attention can become so powerful. When affection is predictable, your brain adapts to it. But when affection is unpredictable, every positive interaction can feel unusually rewarding. They finally respond after hours of silence. They suddenly become affectionate. They call unexpectedly. They tell you they miss you. And immediately, the anxiety disappears. You feel relief. That relief can become psychologically reinforcing. Your brain begins associating their attention with emotional reward. So when they withdraw again, you want the reward back. You pursue. You wait. You check, you hope, and when they eventually return, the emotional relief feels powerful all over again. This can create a cycle that looks like love from the outside, but feels more like emotional dependence on the inside. And this is why some relationships become difficult to leave even when they consistently produce anxiety. You aren't only attached to the person, you can become attached to the hope of the next moment of reassurance. That distinction matters. Because if uncertainty is increasing your obsession, Chasing the person will rarely solve the underlying problem. It can actually strengthen the cycle. The Bible gives us a powerful principle in Proverbs 4 verse 23. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Notice the language. Guard your heart, not because love is dangerous, but because your inner world can become disordered when you allow another person's behavior to control your emotional stability. You can care about someone without constantly monitoring them. You can desire an answer without demanding one immediately. You can miss someone without making their attention your emotional oxygen. And you can accept uncertainty without allowing it to consume your identity. This is where secure attachment begins. Not with becoming indifferent, not with pretending you don't care, but with learning to tolerate the uncomfortable space between what you want and what you actually know. You may want them to choose you, but you don't yet know whether they will. You may want the relationship to continue, but you cannot force another person's heart. And that uncertainty can feel uncomfortable. But sometimes emotional maturity means allowing reality to reveal itself instead of trying to force reality to give you the answer you want. Because when you constantly chase certainty from another person, you can accidentally turn connection into pressure. And that brings us to the next question. What happens when the person you're pursuing begins to feel that pressure? Imagine someone you care about starts becoming distant. You notice the change, so you try harder. You send more messages. You ask what is wrong. You explain how much you care. You ask whether they still want the relationship. You offer more attention. You become more available. From your perspective, it feels like love. You are trying to save the connection. But imagine experiencing the same situation from the other person's perspective. Every delayed response creates another question. Every request for reassurance creates another emotional responsibility. Every attempt to create closeness begins to feel like an expectation. And eventually, something changes. The relationship no longer feels like a place where two people freely choose each other. It begins to feel like a place where one person's emotional security depends on the other person's constant availability. That is when love can become pressure, and pressure can create distance. Psychologically, human beings have two important needs that must exist together: connection and autonomy. We want to feel close to people, but we also want to feel that we still have freedom over our own decisions, emotions, time, and boundaries. When someone feels that their freedom is being restricted, they may instinctively begin creating distance. This is sometimes described as psychological reactance, the tendency to resist when we feel that our freedom is being threatened. Think about what happens when someone repeatedly says, "Why didn't you answer? Where were you? Do you still love me? Why aren't you as interested as before? Who were you talking to?" One question may not be a problem, but when reassurance becomes a constant requirement, the other person can begin feeling trapped. Now, every delayed response has consequences. Every boundary can be interpreted as rejection. Every request for space can become an emotional crisis. So they withdraw, and their withdrawal creates even more anxiety. You pursue harder. They pull away further, and the cycle becomes stronger. Fear creates pursuit. Pursuit creates pressure. Pressure creates withdrawal. Withdrawal creates more fear. This is one of the most important patterns to understand about anxious attachment. The behavior intended to preserve the relationship can become the behavior that makes the relationship harder to sustain. But there is an even deeper biblical principle here. 1 Corinthians 13 describes love as patient and kind. It says that love does not insist on its own way. That is a profound description of healthy love, because control can disguise itself as care. You might say, "I just want to know where I stand." But underneath that question may be, "I need you to behave differently so I can stop feeling afraid." You might say, "I just want more communication." But underneath it may be, "I need constant access to you so I can feel secure." You might say, "I don't want to lose you." But underneath it may be, "I don't know who I am if you leave." The difference is subtle but enormous. Love invites. Control pressures. Love allows another person to have freedom. Control needs their behavior to produce emotional security. And this does not mean you should tolerate neglect, disrespect, manipulation, or inconsistent treatment. Healthy relationships require communication and boundaries. But there is a difference between expressing a need and demanding that another person constantly regulate your emotions. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is communicate honestly once, and then observe what the other person chooses to do. You don't have to explain the same feeling 10 different ways. You don't have to convince someone to care. You don't have to chase someone into choosing you, because genuine connection requires reciprocity. And this leads to a difficult but liberating truth. If you have to constantly pursue someone to keep them emotionally present, the problem may not be that you haven't tried hard enough. The problem may be that you're trying to create, through effort, something that requires mutual willingness. And once you understand that, you can stop asking, "How do I make them stay?" and begin asking, "What is their behavior already telling me?" That question can be painful, but it can also set you free. Because sometimes the person isn't running away from your love. They are running away from the pressure created when your fear becomes attached to that love. And to understand why that fear can become so powerful, we have to go deeper, not into the relationship, but into the heart of the person doing the chasing. If chasing creates pressure, we have to ask a deeper question. Why does their distance create so much fear in the first place? Because sometimes you are not only afraid of losing the person, you are afraid of what losing the person might mean about you. Maybe you think, what if nobody else wants me? What if I never find someone like them again? What if they choose someone better than me? What if being rejected proves that I'm not enough? Now, the relationship has become more than a relationship. It has become evidence. Evidence of your worth. Evidence that you're desirable. Evidence that you're lovable. And when that person's attention decreases, it can feel as though your value is decreasing with it. That is why rejection can hurt so deeply. The loss is emotional, but the interpretation can be psychological. You don't simply think, "They don't want this relationship." You begin thinking, "They don't want me." Those are not the same statement. One describes another person's decision. The other becomes a judgment about your identity. And once identity becomes attached to another person's approval, chasing becomes almost inevitable. You start trying to reverse the rejection. You explain yourself. You become more agreeable. You overlook things you would normally consider unacceptable. You give more than you receive. You abandon your boundaries. You become whoever you think they want you to be, not because you are incapable of being yourself, but because rejection has become psychologically threatening. Scripture speaks directly to this problem. Proverbs 29 verse 25 says, "The fear of man bringeth a snare." A snare is a trap, and fear of human approval can become exactly that. You begin living according to another person's reactions. If they are happy, you're happy. If they are distant, you're anxious. If they praise you, you feel valuable. If they reject you, you feel worthless. Your emotional center has moved outside of you, and that is why biblical identity matters so much. Throughout Scripture, human worth is not ultimately established by popularity, romantic attention, status, or acceptance. Galatians 1 verse 10 asks whether we are seeking the approval of people or of God. That question exposes something important. Whose approval has the greatest authority over your identity? If another person's approval has become more important than your understanding of who you are before God, then losing that person's attention can feel like losing yourself. And this is where chasing becomes more than a relationship problem. It becomes an identity problem. You are no longer simply pursuing a person. You are pursuing confirmation. Confirmation that you are enough. Confirmation that you are desirable. Confirmation that you matter. But no human being was designed to carry that responsibility. Even the healthiest relationship cannot permanently answer the question, am I worthy? Because if your identity depends on another person's love, you will eventually become afraid of losing their love, and fear changes behavior. It makes you overthink. It makes you overgive. It makes you tolerate things you should confront. It makes you cling when you should step back. It makes you chase when you should observe. But there's another way. Instead of asking, how do I make this person choose me? You can begin asking, why do I need this person to choose me before I believe I am valuable? That question moves the battle from the relationship to the heart. And when your identity becomes more secure, something remarkable happens. You can still desire someone. You can still pursue a relationship. You can still feel disappointed when someone walks away. But you no longer have to collapse when they don't choose you. You can hear no without interpreting it as you are nothing. You can experience distance without desperately trying to close it. You can love someone without possessing them. And you can release someone without believing that your future has been destroyed. This is what biblical security begins to look like, not the absence of emotion, the presence of a deeper foundation. Because when you know your worth is not determined by another person's attention, you no longer have to chase people to prove that you are worth choosing. And now we can finally address the practical question. How do you stop chasing without becoming cold, distant, or manipulative? So, if chasing can create pressure and insecurity can make us chase, what are we actually supposed to do? Should you stop texting? Should you pretend not to care? Should you become emotionally unavailable so the other person starts chasing you? No, that simply replaces anxious attachment with manipulation. The goal is not to become harder to get. The goal is to become harder to destabilize. There's a difference. You can still communicate. You can still express affection. You can still pursue someone you genuinely care about. But you stop allowing fear to control the way you pursue them. The first step is simple but uncomfortable. Pause before pursuing. Before sending another message, making another call, or asking for reassurance, ask yourself, am I reaching out because I genuinely have something to communicate, or because I am uncomfortable with their silence? If it is anxiety, don't immediately act on it. Give yourself time, because an anxious emotion demands immediate action. Security allows you to wait. The second step is to look at patterns instead of isolated moments. If someone responds warmly once, that doesn't necessarily mean they want a relationship. If someone takes hours to respond once, that doesn't necessarily mean they are rejecting you. Secure thinking looks at the broader pattern. Are they consistently interested? Do they initiate? Do they make time? Do their words and actions agree? Do they respect you? Do they make an effort? Stop trying to interpret every individual moment. Watch the pattern. The third step is to allow reciprocity. A relationship should not require one person to carry all the emotional weight. If you're always initiating conversations, always planning, always apologizing, always repairing, and always trying to restore closeness, stop for a moment, not as a game, not to punish them, simply to observe. What happens when you stop doing all the work? Sometimes the answer reveals something you could never discover by chasing harder. The fourth step is to rebuild your life outside the relationship. Return your attention to your purpose, your work, your friendships, your family, your responsibilities, your spiritual life, your growth. Your relationship should add to your life, not become the entire foundation of it. Because the more empty your life becomes outside one person, the more powerful that person's attention becomes inside your mind. The fifth step is learning to tolerate uncertainty. You may not know what they're thinking today. You may not know whether the relationship will continue. You may not know whether they will choose you. And that's uncomfortable. But uncertainty is not an emergency. You don't need to solve every emotional question immediately. Sometimes you need to allow time and behavior to reveal the truth. This is where faith becomes practical. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding." That doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to believe that you must control every outcome to be okay. So instead of praying, "God, make this person choose me," try praying, "God, give me wisdom to recognize what is healthy, courage to accept what is not, enough security in you that I don't have to chase what you have not given me." That changes everything. Because surrender is not giving up on love. It is giving up the illusion that you can control another person's heart. And finally, Learn to accept reciprocity as information. If someone wants to build something with you, you should eventually see movement from both sides. You shouldn't have to convince someone indefinitely. You shouldn't have to perform for affection. You shouldn't have to abandon your dignity to maintain connection. Healthy love has room to breathe. It has communication. It has boundaries. It has freedom. And it has choice. So stop asking, what can I do to make them stay? Ask instead, are we choosing each other freely? Because the moment you stop trying to force connection, you create space for something much healthier, the truth. And sometimes the truth is that the relationship can become stronger. Sometimes the truth is that the other person wasn't as invested as you hoped. Either way, you gain something chasing could never give you: clarity. Maybe the hardest lesson about chasing people is this: you cannot create genuine connection by trying harder to control someone's feelings. You can communicate. You can show interest. You can love deeply. You can make your intentions clear. But you cannot force another person's heart to move toward you. And perhaps that's what makes this so difficult. Because when someone begins pulling away, your instinct may be to close the distance. But sometimes the healthier response is to stop and ask, what is my fear trying to make me do? If fear is telling you to chase, pause. If insecurity is telling you that the rejection means you're worthless, remember who you are. If uncertainty is making you obsess, allow reality to reveal itself. And if someone genuinely chooses to walk away, don't turn their decision into a verdict on your value. Their choice is information about the relationship. It is not a definition of your identity. Psalm 37 verse 7 says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him." Sometimes waiting is not weakness. Sometimes waiting is a discipline of refusing to manipulate an outcome you cannot control. You don't have to become cold. You don't have to play games. You don't have to pretend you don't care. You simply have to become secure enough to care without losing yourself. Because healthy love doesn't say, "I need you to choose me so I can feel valuable." It says, "I value you, but I know my value doesn't depend on whether you choose me." And that is the difference between attachment driven by fear and attachment grounded in security. So the next time you feel the urge to chase someone who is pulling away, don't immediately send another message. Pause, breathe, pray, look at the pattern, and ask yourself one final question. Am I pursuing this person because I genuinely love them, or because I'm afraid of being without them? The answer may reveal more about your heart than you expected. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding tighter. Sometimes it's having enough security to let love breathe. If this video helped you understand relationships, human behavior, and scripture from a deeper perspective, subscribe to Hidden Biblical Psychology, because the Bible didn't just tell stories, it exposed the human heart.